Green Hill Zone boss. That iconic looping theme, that checkerboard dirt, those looping palm trees. Before any of the series' more elaborate set pieces, before the giant mechanized monstrosities and reality-bending crises, Green Hill Zone Act 3 hands you Dr. Eggman and the Egg Mobile with a wrecking ball attached. The zone released in 1991 on the Sega Genesis as the very first level of Sonic the Hedgehog, and its three-act structure builds deliberately toward that confrontation. Act 1 lets you find your rhythm, Act 2 introduces verticality with loop-de-loops and slopes, and Act 3 dumps you into a flat arena with the bald maniac in a rotating ball machine. The specifics are deliberately minimal. Eggman's vehicle has a simple floating ball pattern. It fires a basic projectile. The floor is flat, the ceiling is open, and if you touch the badnik at ground level, it's your own fault. There's no second form, no transformation sequence, no music change that signals a shift in difficulty, just one health bar, one pattern, one exit. This is a boss that a player encountering it for the first time has absolutely no reason to fear, which is precisely the point. After the fight concludes, Sonic simply runs forward and the world transitions to the next zone, Marble Zone, with its lava pits and its own, slightly more complicated Eggman encounter. And yes, Green Hill Zone is technically the easiest final boss in the entire series, but here's where it stops being simple and starts being a statement. Because this fight was written in 1991 by a team that had no idea how many more of these they would need to design, the constraints forced them to nail down the one mechanic that would define every Sonic boss that followed. You bounce off Eggman when he touches the ground, you hit him when he's vulnerable, and the whole encounter resolves in under 30 seconds if you know what you're doing. That's not simplicity as a lack of imagination, it's simplicity as the clearest possible expression of the game's core mechanic, stripped to its absolute bones. Every ring you collect in Green Hill Zone's earlier acts is tested against this one fight, and the fact that it's so over in a flash doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it the thesis. The whole series is in there, timing, speed, pattern recognition, and the understanding that the boss is supposed to be a punctuation mark on a level, not the main event itself. Mecca Sonic. But that's not the weirdest part of how Sonic 2 handles its roster. By the time you reach the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Mecca Sonic has appeared in multiple games with variations in design, and the fight demands perfection from you under the most punishing conditions the series has ever put a player through. This is a bulky robot replica of Sonic the Hedgehog, bulkier than Metal Sonic, with less personality and more hardware, and the most important thing to understand right away is that Mecha Sonic and Metal Sonic are not the same character. They are separate machines that look similar by coincidence, which is the kind of detail Sega has never bothered to fully clarify, and which has confused players for decades. Mecha Sonic appeared as a late-stage boss in the 16-bit edition of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, appeared as a major antagonist in Sonic & Knuckles, where Knuckles faces a golden version called Super Mecha Sonic, made a brief cameo appearance alongside Metal Sonic in Sonic Adventure, and in a quirk that speaks to how little narrative thought Sega has ever given this particular robot, is sometimes described by the wider community as a series of similar machines rather than a single rebuilt model, because each of those 4 appearances gave him a completely different visual design and no consistent backstory to tie them together. Super Mecha Sonic transforms into a golden form in Sonic & Knuckles when facing Knuckles, which is a detail so weirdly specific that it never gets mentioned in any other context in the series. The fight itself is one of the most demanding sequences in any mainline Sonic game. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2, after clearing the Mecha Sonic boss encounter, players are immediately pushed into the Death Egg robot fight, and both of these back-to-back battles happen with 0 rings allowed. 1 hit, 1 mistake, you reset entirely. This is the kind of constraint that turns a regular boss into a memorization exercise, and the fact that it was placed at the end of an already difficult game means players who reached it were already exhausted. The design required perfection, not skill. You had to know the patterns cold before you even press start on that fight, because the margin for error was non-existent. A single paragraph of consequence. This is a boss sequence that eliminates your safety net completely, forcing you to rely entirely on pattern knowledge in a game that, up to that point, had been built around speed, momentum, and the occasional recovery via rings. The transition from a game that rewards aggressive forward movement to one that demands you stand perfectly still until the boss exposes itself is jarring in a way that no other Sonic game has ever matched. The player who reaches the Mecha Sonic fight has mastered the zone layouts, collected the special stages, and cleared the other bosses with what felt like ease. Now they have to forget everything that got them there and play like a different kind of player entirely. Nobody investigated why this tonal whiplash existed. Nobody adjusted the difficulty curve leading into it. It just appears, fully formed, as if the developers realized at the last moment that the game needed a wall before the final zone and built it out of the hardest available materials. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which final boss you think was the most brutal difficulty spike. Let's get back into it. Egg Fortress Boss. This is the one you can actually go play right now. No hunting down cartridges or emulation required. Just boot up Sonic Superstars and you're at the latest challenge in the series. The final confrontation in Egg Fortress Zone Act 2 is a multi-stage boss fight that stands out for its sustained challenge over multiple phases. The structure on paper sounds manageable, just 2 phases, but the execution transforms that simplicity into something that demands near-perfect execution across a punishingly long sequence. The first phase stretches across a shifting industrial arena where Eggman's war machine unleashes wave after wave of attacks with no room for error. You need precision movement and split-second timing just to survive the opening minutes, let alone chip meaningfully into the health bar. Halfway through, the fight shifts. New patterns emerge, the arena reconfigures, and tactics that kept you alive for the first half suddenly stop working. Every mistake costs you tangible progress, and progress here is measured in minutes of clean play, not seconds. There are no checkpoints throughout the fight, not even at the phase transition. The entire gauntlet from the moment you enter that arena until the machine collapses is one uninterrupted sequence. Dying at any point, in either phase, at any percentage of the boss's health, drops you straight back to the very beginning. You watch the opening sequence again, you run through the Phase 1 opener again, and if you falter again, you watch it all again from scratch. Is this just a hard boss fight? Sure, in the same way a marathon is just a long run. The distinction matters because the zero checkpoint design in a multi-phase encounter eliminates the learning structure that normally makes difficult encounters fair. Earlier Sonic bosses often include waypoints or checkpoints that let you retry a phase without replaying the whole fight. This one demands you nail the full sequence perfectly, start to finish, with no safety net anywhere along the way. That single design decision transforms what could have been a standard difficult fight into something that tests your ability to maintain flawless execution under sustained pressure. What this reveals about how Sonic difficulty has evolved is that the series is still willing to drop the training wheels when it matters. The players who beat it will cite those exact same details as proof it earns its reputation. Many fans regard it as among the hardest bosses in recent Sonic games. Those rotating flames demand pixel-perfect jump timing. The homing missiles punish anyone who stops moving for even a fraction of a second, and the phase shifting between 2D and 3D followed by a skydiving portal segment leaves no room to find a rhythm, no safe sequence to learn and internalize. Every attack stacks on top of the last with no lull, no recovery window, no moment to breathe. That's where the claim falls apart. Not that the fight is easy, but that calling it well-designed difficulty is a different conversation entirely. Egg Dragoon. The philosophy running through this one is the opposite kind of failure. While the previous entry tested your ability to hold focus across an exhausting gauntlet, this fight throws you into constant tactical reinvention. It was originally built for Sonic Unleashed as one of Eggman's war machines and returned in Sonic Generations, demanding you shift strategy as the arena evolves. Rotating flames consume the stage, missiles lock onto your position and require you to keep moving at all times, and the moment you settle into a rhythm, the rules change underneath you. Egg Dragoon is widely regarded as one of the tougher bosses in Sonic Generations. The fight stacks fire attacks, homing missiles, and sudden phase changes to keep you on your toes throughout the battle. 8 hits total, split across both halves of the machine, every single one earned while the arena itself is actively trying to kill you. By the textbook explanation, this is exactly what a Sonic final boss should be. Fast, dynamic, requiring you to master the full range of Sonic's movement toolkit, visually spectacular, mechanically dense. And that framing is not wrong on its face. What it fails to cover is that the difficulty here is difficulty by accumulation rather than difficulty by design. Each individual attack pattern is fair in isolation. The flames have a clear tell, the missiles have a tracking arc you can read, the transitions between dimensions have consistent rules, but no one ever has time to actually practice any single element because the next one arrives before the previous one has finished resolving. You're being tested on pattern recognition under conditions that actively prevent you from completing a single pattern before the next one arrives. It's not a difficulty curve, it's a difficulty wall, and the only way through is to already be good enough to handle every possible state simultaneously. The image this leaves is Eggman's machine doing something genuinely unsettling. It's making Sonic's greatest strength, his speed, his ability to read and react, the very thing that makes the fight impossible to slow down and learn. The harder you play like Sonic, the less time you have to actually figure out what's happening. Nega Wisp Armor. One machine was built for a single climactic fight. This one is powered by the Wisp's energy. Eggman doesn't just send out another robot. He reroutes the flow of an alien planet, intercepting Sonic and Tails as the incredible interstellar amusement park starts to collapse around them. With the Nega Wisp Armor, Eggman isn't trapping Sonic on a narrow stage or blocking the exit to a zone. He's channeling the energy of the Wisps, raising the stakes to rescuing every Wisp in the amusement park. What makes the Nega Wisp Armor unique is how quickly it escalates from showpiece to existential threat. In the Wii version of Sonic Colors, all paths converge on the moment Eggman pilots the Nega Wisp Armor and attempts to quash Sonic's escape during the park's evacuation. The machine itself is a monstrous suit powered by the forcibly harnessed energy of the Wisps, pushing Eggman's obsession with control to the natural limit. Sonic doesn't just defeat it, he dismantles the mechanism right as the structure starts to implode, freeing the Wisps and ending the mass energy theft that powered the entire park. On console, this boss is the final fight. The game ends after you defeat it. If the player collects all 7 Chaos Emeralds, they unlock a separate Supersonic fight right after, which reshuffles the boss order and moves Nega Wisp Armor down a tier. Same machine, same threat, different timeline, trading the familiar final showdown for a bonus layer. The DS version doesn't just change the structure, it forces a choice. If you haven't collected the emeralds, Nega Wisp Armor is the last thing you see. If you have, Sonic morphs into Supersonic and dives straight into the true ending, leaving Nega Wisp Armor behind. That looks like a cut-and-dry split, but the evidence tilts both ways. On Wii, the battle is universal. Every player faces the Nega Wisp Armor as the final boss, with no special unlocks or alternate forms. On DS, the emeralds shift the mechanic completely, giving a select group of players an extra final challenge. But the machinery itself is constant. Whether it's the last act or just the penultimate obstacle, the Nega Wisp Armor marks the breaking point in Eggman's plan, and the moment the player scrambles to reverse everything that's gone wrong. Underneath, the design does more than threaten Sonic with another mechanical monster. The true mechanism is how it turns the entire amusement park into a system of extraction and domination. Eggman's hold over the Wisps isn't just metaphorical. It's built into the machinery, visible on the screen as their energy fuels his armor and powers his offensive phases. Triumph is measured by how completely Sonic scraps the device, ending the drain and freeing every Wisp at once. Whether you see it as a boss, a system, or a cycle, the Nega Wisp Armor is engineered not just to block Sonic's escape, but to amplify everything Eggman's ever wanted: control, scale, and ultimate closure. Big Arm. If previous bosses had a window for patience or precision, Big Arm throws that out the instant it arrives. Nothing grants you extra protection. Sonic 3's final boss on Genesis is the battle where timing is critical. Some players consider Big Arm the hardest Sonic 3 boss due to its punishing mechanics. 75 supers by forum consensus, and the evidence stacks up fast. Big Arm is the final boss of Launch Base Zone Act 2, with Eggman at the controls inside a spiked mech with 2 large arms. The arms swing outward, scoop in, and pile drive with a move that can end a run instantly, no matter how many rings you've managed to hang on to. In Sonic 3, Big Arm can defeat Sonic regardless of rings if caught by its grab move, miss the narrow window to land a hit, and the arms clamp down, making any contact with even a single pixel of the spikes an invitation to lose nearly all your rings. Attention resets now. Timing is no longer negotiable. Big Arm's design is unforgiving. Players must attack during brief openings as the boss rises or falls. Every risky move is punished. Every missed hit leaves Sonic exposed. No rolling patterns, no gradual escalation. Just instant consequence. This isn't a boss that lets you brute force your way through. The only way past is precision, and there's no bypass for the awkward mechanics or the relentless spike coverage. Eggman's machine trades spectacle for brutality. Its giant arms and spikes aren't for show. They're calibrated to make the fight mechanically uncomfortable and relentless. Doomsday Zone's boss is known as the Ending in Sonic & Knuckles, but Big Arm is infamous for its small margin for error and punishing grabs. The design reason is clear. Big Arm is built for mastery, not spectacle. Its patterns reward only the sharpest timing and punish any hesitation, landing as the Genesis era's statement piece. the fight that exposes how much the player has actually learned. The boss holds back nothing, offering exacting difficulty that only the most persistent Sonic experts are meant to overcome. Death Egg Robot. Big Arm at least has the decency to look like what it says on the label. A Death Egg Robot does not. The most recent use of this name is something entirely different, wearing it like a costume, a category error Sega canonized without hesitation. Start with Sonic Forces in 2017, where you're told the Death Egg Robot awaits as the climactic threat. The thing that erupts from the arena, however, isn't the iconic final machine from the series' history. It's a giant robot chestburster that explodes out of the last phase of the fight, towering over the battlefield. The official records call it the Death Egg Robot, though its appearance in Sonic Forces is very different from that of its predecessors. The title is there, the identity it once carried is gone, and that is the small version of the problem. Across Sonic Forces, you'll run into mass-produced, unmanned, cycloptic Death Egg robots, deployed in multiples. This isn't the one-of-a-kind war machine that closed out Sonic the Hedgehog 2, it's an army of them, churned out and scattered across the landscape. In Sonic Forces, the Death Egg space station appears, but these robots do not directly connect to its narrative role. Now look at what came before. The original Death Egg Robot, the climactic encounter from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, wasn't even named in its own game. It appeared, imposing and distinct, without fanfare or title card, letting its presence speak for itself. When Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 brought it back as its final boss, it referenced its legacy from Sonic 2. Egg Revery Zone. You could be forgiven for assuming Sonic finales ran on a fixed template. Reach the last zone, defeat the named villain, roll credits. Egg Revery Zone is the true final boss battle of Sonic Mania, following unique design compared to past final bosses. This is the true final boss zone, hidden behind specific conditions that the standard playthrough never triggers. It isn't an extra battle tacked onto the ending. It's a separate, secret zone engineered for one last confrontation that throws out every template for what a Sonic finale should look and play like. The music track for this zone is titled Egg Revery Zone, featured as the theme for Sonic Mania's true final boss battle. Egg Revery Zone introduced a different final boss experience for the series. Egg Robo. The stakes just cranked tighter. Where Egg Revery Zone served as Sonic Mania's true final test, the zone that exists to hold the fight that actually crowns the game, Lost World skipped the cage match and just handed you a robot wearing the egg. Solaris. Every final boss so far has been a familiar thing. A giant robot, an armored suit, a mutated creature, something the series has shown you before in smaller form or earlier iteration. Solaris is introduced as the sun god of Soliana, the final boss in Sonic the Hedgehog, 2006, fought by Super Sonic, Super Shadow, and Super Silver together. The fight spans 2 phases, each with distinct music themes, including a full instrumental version of His World as the main theme in the battle. The gamer groups this alongside the rest of the true final bosses, not the character campaign endings, not the alternate route locks, not the post-credit surprises. Solaris is the real article, the kind of boss that makes people argue about difficulty rankings years after the game has been pulled from store shelves. Sonic, Shadow, and Silver battle Solaris together in the final sequence, each playable in their super forms as they engage the boss. That is the mechanical justification for why the fight does not end when you would expect it to, and why the music keeps pushing even when the screen goes dark. The gameplay centers on learning Solaris's attack patterns over 2 phases, remembered for its challenge amid a divisive game. And here is the question nobody has answered yet. Why does the game that produced this fight, the one that gave you a multi-phase god battle with full orchestral backing and 3 playable characters converging in the same arena, also produce the most chaotic, broken, and criticized narrative in the entire Sonic canon? The fight works, the music works, the scale works, everything around it collapsed. Nobody has explained how that split happened, and the evidence of the Solaris fight sitting there, complete and functional, makes the failure of everything else harder to understand, not easier. Metal Overlord. Sonic Team went deep into spectacle with Solaris, but Metal Overlord demands something stranger and more disciplined. Adaptation mid-battle, with mechanics changing against you in real time. This isn't just a straight slugfest. Right from the start, the fight forces you to read the attacks and respond with surgical precision. Each phase, each move, calls for a specific counter and punishes hesitation. The crystal attack requires precise responses, defeating your team if not countered with specific abilities. Metal Overlord doesn't stop there. He throws attacks including large objects from the Egg Fleet, requiring players to evade or counter through character abilities. That's two entirely different solutions requiring two entirely different characters. He launches spike barrages that must be blocked or countered with the correct timing and character abilities. Time doesn't slow, it freezes. Your only option is to repeatedly hit jump to claw your way through the stun, shaving down the frozen seconds frame by frame. The fight is unique in requiring all three team members' abilities for the victory sequence. In the super form phase, ring drain is slower than in many other Sonic final battles, making for a more sustained challenge. It's not the usual race against depletion, watching your rings vanish in seconds and hoping to find a pickup before you're exposed. It's a longer endurance trial, giving you just enough breathing room to strategize, to swap characters, to line up the next counter, to recover from a mistake, but not enough to get comfortable or stop paying attention. Defeating Metal Overlord requires multiple team blasts, with the sequence set for the boss fight. Players cycle between super form combat, earning team blasts, and executing the sequence until Metal Overlord is defeated. Every phase is a full reset of the engagement loop, and every phase demands you demonstrate mastery over a different character's role within it. The threat stays present until you've proven you can execute the full cycle, not just survive the first round. The strongest counterpoint deserves genuine acknowledgement. If you're efficient and you've memorized the move patterns, you can technically blitz through Metal Madness and Metal Overlord together in under 7 minutes for an A rank. It's not impossible, the game isn't unbeatable, but watch what that benchmark actually demands. It pushes players to optimize routes, time attacks down to frames, and micromanage every single transition between defense and offense without a single wasted second. The challenge isn't just the moves, it's the human cost of sustained precision, of refusing to drift into autopilot when the fight has deliberately designed itself to punish exactly that. At every turn, Metal Overlord makes the player feel the friction of mastery, and the exhaustion of keeping up with it. Final Hazard. Whatever pressure Metal Overlord built, Final Hazard strips away the safety margin entirely, and the stakes are even higher. Final Hazard isn't just a bigger threat or a louder fight. It's a test of everything the player has learned with the difficulty dial cranked past 11. On the Sonic Stadium forum, analysts tried to rank boss difficulty across the franchise, and Final Hazard locked into positions 3 through 7 among the strongest final bosses in Sonic games. That's not a loose ranking where one guy had a strong opinion. Multiple experts converging on the same tier independently, with Final Hazard consistently sitting in that cluster, tells you this fight doesn't just demand skill, it demands a specific kind of integrated skill that most players don't arrive at naturally. The hardest detail to explain, the one that stumped more than a few researchers, is what the ranking system actually required to beat him. The Final Hazard fight features both Sonic and Shadow in their super states during the battle. That distinction isn't just a technicality, it means the fight was asking for something the ranking framework itself struggled to categorize. 2 full super states running at once, with 2 separate ring drains, 2 separate movement patterns, and 0 room to let either one drop. So what would it take for the ordinary explanation to be true? For Final Hazard to be primarily spectacle, a cinematic boss built for narrative weight rather than mechanical substance. It would mean you could brute force your way through it. It would mean one well-timed super attack, one lucky sequence of invincibility frames, one aggressive push that ignores the second character entirely and still gets the job done, but that's not what the ranking system describes. The super state dependency rules that out cold. The player must alternate between controlling Super Sonic and Super Shadow to overcome Final Hazard's attacks. Final Hazard serves as the climactic battle of Sonic Adventure 2, pushing players to utilize the full abilities of both hedgehogs. Time Eater. Time Eater is often noted for its complexity as the final boss of Sonic Generations. In Sonic Generations, launched in 2011 and spanning all major platforms, the Time Eater boss isn't just a spectacle at the end of a nostalgia parade. It's ranked side by side with Metal Overlord, Egg Salamander, Egg Wizard, and Final Hazard. Positions 3 through 7 are earned, not handed out. That's not just a footnote, it's an explicit mark of how contentious the ranking is. And the fight itself? Just getting to the start line demands resources most other bosses don't even hint at. This isn't one Super Sonic flying solo. The player controls both classic and modern Sonic in their super states to defeat Time Eater. The detail matters. This isn't a random backup, it's a coordinated counterattack, and you're forced to juggle multiple characters, multiple strategies, and multiple emerald resources in sequence. This move isn't just lore fluff. It means that, moment to moment, the fight expects you to switch tactics and empowers each team in a way that previous bosses simply didn't require. Both hedgehogs use their super states, with differing attacks for each version. Time Eater is consistently considered among the tougher Sonic final bosses. The bosses that require only one super form feel like gimmicks compared to this layered duel. Here's what's actually at risk. Skill alone isn't enough. The fight forces you to handle all the moving parts: emeralds, team supers, shifting attack windows, under pressure. The resources aren't simply door locks to open, they're live ammo you must reload perfectly. And if your timing falters, you lose, not because you lack power, but because the sequence breaks apart. That's the design intent, and it's what puts Time Eater in the top tier. But the ranking backs up the opposite. The 2 super requirement is the bottleneck, not the shortcut. The bosses in this tier all demand a level of mechanical precision, but Time Eater's fight shifts between different perspectives and attack patterns. All that leaves a question that hasn't been closed. Time Eater's ranking among final bosses remains debated, due to its unique mechanics and presentation. The end. The bosses before this one feel distant. The end is up close and personal, a cosmic threat right in your face and no way around it. The end arrives as the final gate for Sonic Frontiers, Sega's 2022 mainline entry. This isn't a parade of forms or recycled mechanics. You confront a planet-sized entity in space, after beating Supreme just to earn your shot. Fail that gatekeeper, and you never even see the end. When the fight starts, Sonic, already transformed into his super form, struggles to hold off a laser beam so massive it strains the limits of his power. The scale is so far beyond previous finales, there's no illusion. This thing is existential, and it's backed up by mechanics that force you to grapple with it, not just watch. Sage steps in during the climax, assisting Sonic in the fight against the end. The fight isn't a canned animation. On hard difficulty, you face a bullet hell challenge with limited chances and must overcome the end's attacks to win. You finish the job or you don't. On normal or easy, you clear the finale with interactive sequences and cinematic presentation rather than extended combat. It's a mostly hands-off experience where most players see a cinematic conclusion. On hard difficulty, the fight transforms into a bullet hell-style battle, evoking the game's hacking minigame. You're not just dodging, you're pinned inside a shifting maze of laser beams, forced to react fast or get boxed in. You must attack the end strategically during shifting attack patterns to inflict significant damage. The difference between difficulties is dramatic. Normal mode is stripped bare. Hard mode is punishing, kinetic, and mechanical. It's as if the developers left 2 versions behind a locked door, and only the truly determined ever saw the full encounter. That pivot raises a stranger point. The fight's real mechanics are hidden by default, visible only to players who push the difficulty. The end is the final boss with its hardest form locked to hard difficulty, transforming the encounter based on settings. The average playthrough misses the real boss behind the curtain, and only the hard mode survivors square off against the true threat in all its intensity. The end's challenge is reserved for those who set the difficulty higher, turning the encounter into a true test. The planet-sized threat isn't less real, but the challenge itself splits with the difficulty, leaving most players with a cinematic finish, and only a few with a hands-on showdown. Devil Doom. And the end was at least contained to one moment. This one affects everything around it. Shadow had already beaten the game, the credits had already rolled, and Black Doom still had one transformation left, turning himself into Devil Doom inside the Doom Zone to pull Shadow back into white space for a second. More complete erasure. Devil Doom first appears as the final boss of Shadow the Hedgehog and returns in Shadow Generations, presented within Sonic X Shadow Generations. The 2024 version is where the fight actually gets its full shape. Black Doom transforms into Devil Doom to fight Shadow directly, and the battle splits into 2 distinct phases. The fight includes Devil Doom's initial phase, and a secondary Neo-Devil Doom form that follows. During Phase 1, Shadow cycles through the Doom Wing and then the Doom Surf to keep up with the fight, attacks Devil Doom and targets his weak points in multiple ways during the battle. When the health bar empties, the transformation triggers, and Neo-Devil Doom begins the next phase as the challenge escalates. This time the enemy fires blue spears that have to be clashed with to expose Doom's Eye, and mixes in tail swipe attacks on top of that. Shadow ultimately defeats Neo-Devil Doom, concluding the battle against the Black Arms. The whole structure of Shadow Generations makes sense the moment you see what's underneath it. Black Doom was controlling Shadow's Doom powers the entire time, pushing him toward becoming a weapon large enough to serve the invasion, and the Devil Doom fight is the moment that manipulation gets burned out of the system. The fight mechanics don't just describe the enemy, they describe the control architecture Black Doom built around Shadow. Devil Doom's fight is designed to test Shadow's abilities, focusing on his core skills. Neo Devil Doom's attacks include challenging patterns that require timely reactions from the player. Victory over Neo Devil Doom marks the end of Shadow's confrontation and a return to normalcy. Perfect Dark Gaia, but at least Devil Doom had the decency to be one being in one place. This one requires 3 Sonic forms, 3 characters, and the game's own difficulty scale to quantify just how much force it takes to bring something of this mass down. Perfect Dark Gaia is the final boss of Sonic Unleashed, defeated using Super Sonic after Dark Gaia has transformed into its true form. The strength of Perfect Dark Gaia is notable among Sonic final bosses, but specific numerical rankings like 2.25 supers are not part of the official game data. The fight structure earns that rating rather than just declaring it. Perfect Dark Gaia is fought with Super Sonic, and Chip assists in cutscenes but not as a playable form. The game's boss structure emphasizes Super Sonic's power, but does not quantify it with any numeric system. The skeptic's immediate read is that this is just a multi-phase health bar stretched across 3 forms to fake difficulty, and the rating of 2.25 supers doesn't help. It sounds like a decimal padding a 3 into something more specific. But the structure of the fight dismantles that reading completely. The fight with Perfect Dark Gaia is a multi-phase battle using Super Sonic, with Chip playing a supporting role. The game is not asking you to bring more of the same power, it's asking you to bring 3 different kinds of power, including a character who is explicitly not Sonic. That specificity in the requirement is what the difficulty number is actually measuring. The masculine pronouns used in the source material matter here because they're attached to a force the game treats as planetary. Not a demon lord with a plan, not a corrupted scientist with a scheme, but something that is simply the weight of the world personified and hostile. Dark Gaia was always going to wake up. The Chip and Light Gaia dynamic was always going to end in this confrontation. The difficulty rating quantifies that inevitability in a number the player can see before the fight starts, which is the game being unusually honest about what it's asking you to survive. That number sits below Solaris for a reason, but it leaves a wide gap between it and everything below it on the list, which is what makes the system it belongs to work. Perfect chaos. 3 forms, 3 transformations, 3 cycles. Perfect Dark Gaia just made you burn through Super Sonic, then Chip, then Base Sonic, a grueling gauntlet that should set the standard right here. But the rule never existed. Perfect Chaos is the final boss of Sonic Adventure, fought by Super Sonic in a straightforward showdown. If you're following the rules of escalation, this is the boss that tears up the script, and proves the metric was never mechanical complexity. It starts at Angel Island. Dr. Eggman cracks the Master Emerald, and an ancient aquatic creature, Chaos, is released from its prison. Weak, anemic, and barely threatening, Chaos' original form is a shadow of what comes later. Eggman isn't looking for a challenge, he's aiming for a spectacle. Chaos transforms into Perfect Chaos after harnessing the power of all 7 Chaos Emeralds. The power surge is immediate and ruthless. December 23, 1998, Sonic Adventure's release gives us Perfect Chaos in its most powerful city-leveling form. A monster made entirely of water looms above a ruined city, reshaping skyscrapers with each thrashing limb, while Super Sonic rockets through the destruction and Open Your Heart blares as the soundtrack for impact. And now the numbers stack up. Perfect Chaos draws its power from the Chaos Emeralds and is defeated by Super Sonic. In the difficulty ranking for Sonic bosses, it sits aside Devil Doom, but the fight itself isn't about complexity, it's pure spectacle. The decisive blows? The fight against Perfect Chaos involves Super Sonic attacking multiple times through waves and obstacles. It's a living storm, not a test of pattern recognition. That would have been the rule, except there's another contradiction lying in wait. In Sonic Generations, the fight against Perfect Chaos is significantly simplified compared to its original appearance. There, Perfect Chaos is reduced to a 4-hit affair, no elaborate attack patterns, no challenge in dodging, and no real risk of failure. The boss doesn't fight you, it waits out your assault, and the monster made of water becomes an inert damage sponge. You blast through it 4 times, and it's over. The intimidating city-eating Hydra shrinks back to a boss with fewer mechanics than the average mid-game encounter. All the complexity is stripped away. The task is clear, hit until it ends. This is where confusion creeps in, and if you don't draw the line, the distinctions get lost. Chaos appears in multiple forms before transforming into perfect chaos as the final boss. They share a name and an origin, but they are mechanically and visually worlds apart. The weak chaos is Stage 1. The fully transformed perfect chaos, empowered by 7 Chaos Emeralds, is Stage 2. Most fans remember the transition, but in practice, each encounter changes the rules. When people compare the two, they conflate the anemic original with the city-destroying final boss. The difference is everything. One is a setup, the other is the payoff, and the payoff is where the ranking gets messy. Take a step back and look at what this proves about Sonic's final boss logic. The Chaos Emeralds are a power switch. 7 in, monster out, monster defeated. That's the mechanic at play. Not a saga, not a gradual build, but a one-game cycle. Perfect Chaos demonstrates, more clearly than any other, how the emeralds serve purely as an escalation device. No slow burn, no elaborate backstory across titles. One prison break, one transformation, one resolution. The ranking isn't about how complicated the fight is. It's about how cleanly the emeralds supercharge the encounter, and how unmistakably a single game can deliver that transformation. It's the purest engine of difficulty escalation in the series, and it never needed a second act. Mephiles the Dark. Where perfect chaos collapses the escalation rule, Mephiles breaks the timeline, and the stakes ratchet up to a disaster already woven into the foundation. If perfect chaos was a spectacle triggered by the emeralds, Mephiles is a catastrophe seated at the origin, an intentional weaponization that predates every playable moment. Go back to the Solaris project disaster at Soliana's underwater aquatic base. This is the defining fracture. Solaris, the sun god, is split into two entities as the research unravels. One half becomes Iblis, the other Mephiles the Dark. Mephiles isn't spawned by player action or a villain's gambit. He is the dark shadow left over from a sun god's fragmentation. By the time you face him, the groundwork has been laid by the timeline itself. The moment he emerges is the moment the disaster moves from curiosity to threat. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, the final boss is not Mephiles but Solaris, the fusion of Mephiles and Iblis. In Sonic X Shadow Generations, Mephiles appears as a boss specifically in Shadow's story. The encounter is deliberate, not accidental, and Shadow knows the prison, the Scepter of Darkness, his own creation during the events of Sonic 06. Defeating Mephiles is only part of the ritual. After the fight, Shadow reseals him inside the Scepter, unlocking the final Doom power, Doom Wing, and opening the route to Radical Highway. But when did this actually become a problem? It's not the boss fight itself, it's the disaster's setup. The moment the Solaris project goes wrong, Mephiles is born. Containment becomes the fuse. After Shadow locks Mephiles away, the scenario is set for him to fuse with Iblis, snapping back together as Solaris, the very threat that was fractured at the beginning. It's not just that the player won and contained the monster, it's that containment enabled the next catastrophe, and the game's timeline was already feeding forward. This contradiction is the story's engine. Mephiles isn't an escalation by the player's hand, but by an inevitable event baked into the world itself. The boss fight is a resolution, but the timeline's design makes it clear that solving one crisis is a precondition for the next. The disaster at Soliana doesn't get fixed. It just gets trapped, waiting for the moment the seal breaks again. Mephiles is a test not of combat, but of whether containing a crisis is ever enough. The answer? It isn't. Black Doom. If Mephiles was an accident of containment and escalation, Black Doom is pure direct threat. The opposite kind of failure, a warlord whose defeat was never security, only a reprieve. Black Doom is the alien warlord, the leader of the Black Arms, responsible for creating Shadow himself. The stakes couldn't be simpler. He survived. The original expectation was a conclusive ending, Shadow defeating Black Doom in Shadow the Hedgehog 2005. But that ending was only temporary. Black Doom serves as the main antagonist again in Sonic X Shadow Generations, facing Shadow. The player doesn't just fight Black Doom's forces, the campaign is a direct confrontation with Black Doom himself. Shadow Generations, 2024, is only the second Sonic game to feature Shadow as lead protagonist, reaffirming Black Doom's core role as antagonist. The arc isn't just about a rematch, it's about completion. By the time the player reaches the final boss, Devil Doom emerges as Black Doom's true form. The risk is explicit. Black Doom's survival after the events of Shadow the Hedgehog means that the world itself is at stake. Not just a city, not just a contained disaster. He returns as the primary antagonist in Shadow Generations, and his ability to evolve into Devil Doom and then Neo Devil Doom turns the final act into an existential threat. The sense of escalation is direct. You either defeat Black Doom or he takes over everything. No timelines, no split entities, just Shadow versus Creator and survival on the line. What actually governed the saga wasn't a new army, another disaster, or even the scheme of a sun god. The underlying mechanism was survival. Black Doom endured where others vanished, and Shadow's identity as a creation is cemented each time Black Doom returns, growing stronger, reshaping the narrative around him. The fight wasn't just about stopping a villain, it was always about dealing with a flaw that refused to be erased. Black Doom waited, and the Sonic series followed.